There is only one real solution to the seemingly indefinite race problem between white and black in the United States. This is a problem that has existed since the very inception of this nation, with no clear end in sight. Albert Einstein famously defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. In the early 1940s, A. Philip Randolph organized and led a march on Washington, demanding jobs and justice. 20 years later, in 1963, there was the famous March on Washington demanding the same thing. And 20 years after that, at the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington, the cry and the demands for jobs and justice was the same. And now, sadly, in 2020, those same demands have still not been met. Therefore, it is clear that we have to take a different approach. The only real solution to the problem is real justice. But because we have been without justice so long, we have forgotten what real justice looks like. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan taught us that justice is a principle of fair dealing. It is a law that distinguishes between right and wrong. Therefore, that which has been broken, damaged, or destroyed has to be repaired and restored. That which has been taken must be given back. Therefore, justice for black people in America cannot be in the form of renaming a street or taking down racist symbols because of the depth of damage that was done to us. We were kidnapped from a land of our own in which we had autonomy. Our language, our culture, our knowledge of self was taken from us. Our concept of God was taken and then replaced with an image of our tormentors and our abusers. And we were continuously subjected to dehumanizing conditions for centuries, which has resulted in the pitiful condition that we are in today, where we are still trying to convince people that we are human and that our lives matter. Reparatory justice is the only real justice. If we want to be treated as equals and we want real justice, then we must be restored to the level that we were at before the injustice took place. So we must be given a land of our own in which we are free to educate ourselves, produce our own culture, and have our own language. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who began educating the world in the 1930s, taught us what real justice looks like when he provided actual solutions which redeem and restore the people who have been damaged by injustice. On various newspaper publications that he produced and distributed throughout the country and the world, he laid out what the Muslims want. However, in that he was speaking on behalf of all black people in America who are the descendants of slaves. In point number 4, he states, "We want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of their own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to provide such land and that the area must be fertile and minerally rich. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory for the next 20 to 25 years until we are able to produce and supply our own needs." The justice that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is depicting is the solution of God, separation into the prophesied Promised Land. In the past, when the children of Israel were enslaved by an oppressive Pharaoh, God separated them in a land of their own. If God can do it once, then he can do it again. So therefore, in this video, I will do a geopolitical analysis on what that promised land looks like. The freedom, justice, and equality we seek is attainable if we go after and fulfill the outline given to us by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The key parameters outlined by the messenger are that this separate territory must be equivalent to 8 or 10 states. This territory can either be here in the United States or elsewhere in the world. And this territory must be fertile, minerally rich, and have an outlet to the sea. In this presentation, I will do a geopolitical analysis of a separate territory here in the United States, because it is the most practical politically, and it was the suffering of our ancestors here which propelled America to the height and power that this nation has achieved. In order for us to choose the territory that we want here, we have to know the opportunities that are available here. So I will begin by characterizing the land, geography, and the resources that the United States has to offer. I will start on the Atlantic Ocean on the East Coast and move across the land to the Pacific, since that is how America was founded and grew to the great world power. Geographically, the upper part of the East Coast is primarily defined by the Atlantic Coastal Plain, the Piedmont Plateau, and the Appalachian Mountain Chain. The Appalachian Mountain Chain is a major defining geographical feature of the United States territory. The mountain range stretches approximately 1,500 miles long and between 100 to 300 miles wide and extends from Maine to Alabama. The Appalachians are an old, highly eroded mountains, with Mount Mitchell in North Carolina being the highest peak in America east of the Mississippi River. The Appalachian Mountains are composed of several different subgroup mountains, such as the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Valiant Ridge Mountains, and the Appalachian Plateau. The mountains in the Appalachians give way to low-cut valleys. In between the Blue Ridge and the Ridge and Valley Appalachians is a chain of valley lowlands, which together make the Great Appalachian Valley. The valley stretches in a northeast to southeast direction and influences the settlement patterns in the region. Prior to European colonization, various Native American groups developed a network of trails through the Great Appalachian Valley. There are great mineral deposits in the various mountains and valleys within the Appalachians. The Northeast region borders Canada to the north, the Atlantic Ocean to the east, and the Great Lakes region to the west. Historically, this was the New England part of the country. The Northeast is a heavily forested landscape with the northern highlands of the Appalachians inland. The land in the Northeast New England region has very rocky soil and is not fertile or good for vegetation crop farming. However, the Northeast region does have many navigable rivers, bays, harbors, lakes, islands, and ports, like Newport, the Long Island Sound, the Boston and Edgartown harbors, along with the Connecticut River. Historically, the deep, sheltered harbors, along with the plentiful lumber available, enabled this region to produce a maritime-based economy that revolved around shipbuilding, extracting the treasures of the sea, and seaborne commerce. In the development of civilizations, river and sea routes have often been critical means of transportation and navigation, sometimes providing the only means of traversing long and daunting journeys. Still today, most of the cargo that is transported around the world is done by boat, because in many instances it is faster, less expensive, and sometimes the only means of transporting large quantities of heavy bulk material. The Erie Canal was built between 1817 and 1825, and it connects the Hudson River to the Great Lakes region, providing a critical water route and an outlet to the sea. Before the canal was built, there was no water route across the Appalachians. The Erie Canal in New York connects the Northeast to the Midwest and the center of the country, enabling large-scale commercial trade and development. The Northeast has a high latitude compared to most of the rest of the United States and has long, cold winters with many snowstorms. The Northeast does have warm summers, but they are short-lived compared to other regions in the United States. Vermont has a variety of mineral resources, including marble, slate rock, and granite, with the highest granite quarries in the country. Despite the poor agricultural potential in the New England region, the area is still able to produce potatoes, blueberries, and Vermont's trees are known for their maple syrup. Massachusetts is second only to Wisconsin in cranberry production and accounts for a significant margin of the total global supply, as Massachusetts produces millions of barrels of cranberries per year. South of the Northeast is the Mid-Atlantic region, which generally ends as far south as Virginia. States such as Pennsylvania and New York are sometimes included in a grouping of the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic regions. While America was being formed, this region was the bridge between the North and the South. Along with the Appalachians, the Mid-Atlantic region is also host to the Piedmont Plateau and the coastal plains bordering the Atlantic Ocean. Similar to the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic is a highly forested area. However, unlike the New England region, the Mid-Atlantic region provides many agricultural opportunities with much more arable soil and less brutal winters. A plateau is an area of relatively level ground which differs from a plain in its elevation. The Piedmont Plateau lies east of the Blue Ridge Appalachian Mountains and is a barrier landform in between the mountains and the coastal plains. The Piedmont landform is narrow at its northern end near the Hudson River and widens in the southern region. The Piedmont soil is generally clay-like and moderately fertile. Over time, farming has highly degraded the nutrients within the soil of the Piedmont region. East of the Piedmont, coming off the ocean on the east coast, exist the low-lying coastal plains. The Atlantic coastal plain stretches from New York to Florida and widens as you travel south, merging with the coastal plains of the Gulf of Mexico. In the Mid-Atlantic region, the coastal plain hosts a diversity of landscapes as many large inland rivers meet the ocean. The Chesapeake Bay in Maryland is the largest estuary in the United States. Estuaries are bodies of water and the surrounding habitats that occur when rivers meet the ocean. At the meeting of the two water systems, as the freshwater river meets the salty ocean, the chemistry and nutrient concentration of the water changes. The salinity mixes, creating a brackish mixture. At the drowned river mouth, many diverse habitats form, including swamps, marshes, and different wetlands. Estuaries are some of the most productive ecosystems in the world and are typically more biologically productive than the adjacent river or sea. Estuaries provide homes for a wide range of plant and animal species. Many animals use estuary as migration stopovers, and some ocean-dwelling animals use estuaries as breeding grounds. Estuaries are great city-building locations as they often provide protected harbors with direct access to rivers that lead further inland. 22 of the 32 largest cities in the world are located on estuaries. A few major U.S. cities include New York, D.C., San Francisco, New Orleans, and Seattle. In the Mid-Atlantic region, this is a frequent occurrence. The nation's capital, Washington, D.C., is located on a tributary to the Chesapeake Bay, the Potomac River. The Baltimore Harbor was built on the Chesapeake Bay, Philadelphia was built on the Delaware River, and New York was built on the Hudson River. The Delaware and Hudson rivers are vital shipping lanes which travel far inland. The fall line is where the soft, sedimentary rock of the coastal plain meets the harder basement rock of the Piedmont Plateau. As rivers descend to the low-lying plains, there are rapids and waterfalls at the meeting of the two landforms. Below this line, rivers are flat and navigable. This has formed a natural barrier where riverboats typically cannot travel further upstream unless locks are built to raise or lower boats. Many cities were built upon the fall line, including Trenton, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, Raleigh, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Macon, Georgia, Tallahassee, Alabama, and Tuscaloosa. Pennsylvania is an extremely productive state in agriculture, manufacturing, and mineral resources. Approximately 60% of Pennsylvania is covered in forests, and Pennsylvania ranks number 1 in the United States in export-grade hardwood, top 10 in the United States in milk production, and 4th in apple production. Pennsylvania is the 4th largest coal-producing state in the nation, with its coal-producing region in the Ridge and Valley part of the Appalachian Mountains, which also have the largest anthracite coal deposits in the United States. With the advent of fracking, Pennsylvania has become a natural gas powerhouse, second only to Texas in marketed natural gas production. New York State is the 4th most populated state in the country, with New York City being the most populated city. The multitude of cities interconnected from Boston to D.C., including their urban and suburban areas, form a continuous megalopolis that produces one of the world's most important centers of international commerce, that makes up about 1/5 of the United States GDP. Underneath the Mid-Atlantic, you have the Southeast region, or more generally known as the American South. The Southeast region of the U.S. shares many geographic features with the Mid-Atlantic region. The Appalachians and the Piedmont continue to stretch down until Alabama in a southwest direction, and the Atlantic coastal plain extends further inland, covering nearly half of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and the plains cover the entire Florida peninsula. West of Florida, the Gulf coastal plain continues with the southern states that border the Gulf of Mexico. The Appalachians, Piedmont, and the coastal plains all support different mixed forest biomes. The states in the southeast region of the Atlantic coastline are dotted with many islands and estuaries as the continental shelf dips subtly seaward and submerges. The Savannah River forms the border between South Carolina and Georgia, and it has its headwaters in the Appalachians and flows all the way down to the Atlantic coast, providing drinking water to approximately 1.4 million people along the way, before broadening into an estuary at the sea. The Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia is the largest blackwater swamp in North America. Soil is much more than just the dirt beneath our feet. Soil is living earth and is often one of the most important resources which can be taken for granted. Soil is the top layer of the earth distinguished from rocks and is the interface and integration between biology and geology. Soil forms in layers from the top down and is composed of organic matter and sediments. Organic matter comes from dead grasses, leaves, and debris which have been broken down by worms and bacteria, and sediment is made from weathered rocks which have been moved by gravity, water, and wind. As a living part of the ecosystems, soils store and purify water, and they exchange gases with the atmosphere. Since all terrestrial life depends on soil, it is one of the most important resources that we have. The success of any crop is dependent upon the soil in which it is grown. Different types of soil can be distinguished by their texture, structure, and color. The soil type determines which crops grow best in that environment. The five main variables that affect soil characteristics are the parent materials such as the bedrock or pre-existing soils, the climate such as the temperature and the amount of moisture, the topography or the landscape, the animal and plant life of a particular region, and lastly the time that soil has had to develop under the aforementioned variables. The United States Department of Agriculture soil taxonomy has 12 soil orders. The most common soil found in the southeast region of the United States is Altasol soil, which is a thick red clay in the south. Altasol soil is believed to be the ultimate product of continuous weathering of minerals in a humid temperate climate without new soil deposits from glaciation. Altasol soil is naturally suitable for forestry and is highly rich in many minerals, but is depleted in calcium, magnesium, potassium, and organic matter, limiting its ability for continuous agriculture. However, with some soil amendments and fertilizers, Altasol soil can become highly productive and fertile for vegetation agriculture. The further south you go as you descend in latitude, the temperature progressively warms. Most of the southeast of the United States has a humid subtropical climate with warm to hot summers and shorter mild winters, producing long bountiful growing seasons. The southeast is generally humid and gets plentiful rainfall all year round. During the winters, there can be a great difference in temperatures between the states and the region. In Florida, it can be in the 70s, while parts of Virginia could be snowing. Cold polar weather can go as far deep as Florida and bring frost, but it is rare for cold weather to penetrate that far south. The warmer climate of the South is not a fact that can be trivialized, and is one of the most influential factors in the growth and the establishment of the United States. The warm climate of the South provides a long period of approximately 200 to 290 days per year without frost temperatures. This provided tremendous opportunities for highly profitable crops like cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane to be grown. However, these industries were extremely labor intensive, and the Europeans' solution to this was slavery. Millions of African people were kidnapped from their native homes and enslaved in America. This served as a foundational pillar in the inception, development, and the success of the United States. Slavery was the economic base which exponentially propelled the United States to power, as the economies of the southern states were dependent upon export agriculture. Tobacco and cotton were the main cash crops, and therefore the South amassed a massive slave population to power their economy. Via a triangular system of exchange, America and Europe grew wealthy rapidly, while the West African nations were simultaneously left in ruin as their rulers, engineers, craftsmen, politicians, farmers, and workers in every endeavor were stolen and shipped to a distant land. The politics, economy, and social structures of the South was based on slavery. The geographic and climatic factors of the South enabled large-scale plantations, and the economic success of these plantations propelled young America to magnificent power, as the free unpaid labor from the millions of enslaved Africans made the Southern slave masters in the American slave empire very rich. Power derived from the backs of slaves enabled Europeans to conquer the New World, and ultimately it was the power derived from the colonies in the New World which enabled Europe to colonize most of the rest of the planet in the following centuries. The Mason-Dixon line was a geopolitical border that determined the state borders of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia, and used to separate the free and slave states. Every state south of the Mason-Dixon line was considered a southern slave state. The climate and geography in the north was not as conducive to large-scale plantations, otherwise slavery would have most likely been instituted. The Florida Peninsula is a unique extremity of the U.S. territory, as its southern tip is right near the border of the Tropic of Cancer, and the subtropical climate of the south begins to give way to a tropic climate. The entire state of Florida exists on the coastal plain, and Florida is the flattest state in the U.S. The Everglades are a unique wetland ecosystem in southern Florida, and is currently the largest wetland in the United States. The Everglades are a diverse system of lakes, rivers, swamps, marshes, reefs, estuaries, mangroves, and bays, which support various plants and animal species found nowhere else on Earth, like the Florida panther. Sawgrass marsh dominates the territory, as the Everglades are actually a free-flowing, slow-moving, shallow river. The flow of water from the headwaters of the Kissimmee River moves southward toward the Florida Bay over the sawgrass of lowlands. This is why the Everglades are known as the River of Grass, and the Native Americans call this territory Pahokee, meaning grassy waters. The Everglades are a host to sawgrass, orchards, cypress trees, pine apple trees, mahogany trees, and wildflowers. The Everglades are now classified as an international biosphere reserve and a wetland of international importance. However, the Everglades National Park, established in 1947, protects just the southern 20% of the original Everglades area. The wetlands are a vital resource as they improve water quality by filtering out pollutants, absorbing excess nutrients, and replenishing aquifers. About 1/3 of Florida's population rely on the Everglades for their water supply, along with irrigation for the state's agriculture. Historically, water entered Lake Okeechobee from the Kissimmee River and then flowed out of the southern edge of the lake in a broad sheet flow of river grasses. The water crept slowly across the landscape. To reduce the impact of the periodic floods on the metropolitan area and farms that were being built, drainage ditches were built which channeled water directly to the Gulf and to the Atlantic Ocean. Additional channels were built north of the lake for sugarcane plantations. Draining first began to control flooding of certain areas. However, this redirection of water, along with various agricultural projects, has damaged much of the delicate and diverse ecosystem of the Everglades. The Florida Bay is unlike most estuaries because instead of being fed by a single river, the fresh water supply meets the ocean through the river of grasses. The Florida Bay is home to great fishing and is one of the reasons why Florida is considered by some to be the fishing capital of the world. Florida's southern latitude enables the climatic conditions that are great for agricultural production. Florida's growing season is almost all year round, up to 8 months on some items. So while more northerly states begin to slow down production as fall and winter comes, Florida continues to grow different types of fruits and vegetables. In 2017, Florida ranked first in the United States in the production of oranges, grapefruit, cucumbers, and sugarcane, while ranking second in strawberries and watermelons. Florida accounted for 45% of the total U.S. citrus fruit production, while California accounted for 51%, and Texas and Arizona combined for 4%. The Great Lakes in between Canada and the U.S. are a unique geographic feature unmatched in magnitude of fresh water anywhere else on Earth. The Great Lakes are known as America's inland sea and are the largest collection of fresh water on the planet, containing 20% of the world's supply of surface fresh water. There is enough water in the Great Lakes to cover the contiguous United States 3 meters deep in water. The Great Lakes are composed of 5 interconnected lakes with water flowing from Lake Superior to Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, and then through Lake Erie, and then finally into Lake Ontario in a dramatic fashion via the Niagara Falls. Lake Ontario flows into the St. Lawrence River, which empties out into the Atlantic Ocean. Lake Superior is the coldest and the deepest of the lakes, containing half of the entire water supply. Lake Erie is the warmest and the shallowest of the lakes. Together, the Great Lakes provide a diversity of habitat that supports large amounts of different animal species. These include forests, wetlands, grasslands, along with unique freshwater estuaries. Freshwater estuaries happen when a freshwater river empties out into a larger lake. The different chemicals and temperature of the river and the lake waters create the estuary conditions. The Welland Canal is a man-made shipping canal which connects Lake Ontario to Lake Erie, avoiding the waterfalls that pose hazards to the ships. This is a vital canal that connects the inland center of the United States to the Atlantic Ocean and enables the massive industrial production of the Midwest to be exported in an efficient, cost-effective manner. 40 million tons of cargo are carried through the Welland Canal annually. The Great Lakes provide natural water filtration, flood control, nutrient cycling, and bountiful natural resources. The Great Lakes' massive water supply is also used to provide drinking water for approximately 40 million people, along with billions of liters per day for the farms and the industries in the region. With increased urban populations, the coastal habitats are degrading and the lakes are being exposed to industrial pollutants. In the Great Lakes, water flows slowly from the source and less than 1% of the water leaves the system annually. Therefore, pollutants can last in the system for decades. Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, and Milwaukee all owe their locations based on their access to the Great Lakes. The massive size of the Great Lakes also produces the phenomenon known as lake effect snow. Lake effect snow forms when cold, below freezing air passes over the lake's warmer waters. This causes some of the lake's water to evaporate and warm the air. Then, when this evaporated moist air moves away from the lake, after cooling in the cold climate, the air dumps moisture on the ground in the form of snow. This effect can dump massive amounts of snow in a very short time. While many don't associate snow with soil fertility, snow actually plays a crucial role in maintaining healthy soils throughout the winter months. Snow covering in early winter months serve to insulate the ground by preventing heat from escaping into the atmosphere and blocking the cold air from moving into the soil. By insulating the heat, snow restricts the depth of the frost layer, or the area of the soil containing ice. The areas of soil below the frost layer contain life and microorganisms, and therefore a deep snow covering provides a refuge for the life of the soil. Soils without snow coverings freeze to greater depths and go through freeze and thaw cycles. Freeze and thaw cycles where the water expands and contracts can severely damage plant roots. Snow also serves as protection for erosion, which can break apart the soil, making it less fertile. Snow is sometimes referred to as the poor man's fertilizer because it is a source of plant available nitrogen in small amounts of trace elements. One of the most important features of the United States geography is the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is one of the most important and powerful river systems on the planet and a defining geographical feature of the North American continent. When including its tributaries, the Mississippi is the fourth longest river in the world in length and the fifth largest drainage basin in area. The primary tributaries to the Mississippi are the Ohio River to the east with its headwaters in Pittsburgh, and the Missouri River to the west with its headwaters in Montana. Together with its many tributaries, the Mississippi drains approximately 1,245,000 square miles, or approximately 40% of the continental United States, including all or parts of 32 states and 2 Canadian provinces. The Mississippi River was absolutely critical for the early European and American colonizers, as it provided essential transportation. Before the railroads and ground infrastructure was built, it was actually easier for goods in Pittsburgh to be sent down the Ohio River to join with the Mississippi River and then sent out of the port of New Orleans and sail all the way around Florida up the Atlantic coast to reach New York than it was to traverse the Appalachian Mountains with no ground infrastructure. With the thousands of miles of tributary streams and rivers, the Mississippi is like the central nervous system of the United States. Pittsburgh, Columbus, Cincinnati, Louisville, St. Louis, Kansas City, Omaha, and St. Paul all owe their locations to the river systems they provide access to. The port city of New Orleans, as the point where the Mississippi meets the ocean, is one of the most important cities in the history of the United States because whoever controlled this city controlled the Mississippi River shipping and therefore the entire middle country. Therefore, New Orleans was extremely valuable to France, who controlled the city and most of the Mississippi drainage basin. France had a vision of a Western empire centered on international trade with their slave plantations in the Caribbean, producing sugar, coffee, other forms of tropical produce, and their dominance over New Orleans and the Mississippi River controlling the middle country of North America. However, in 1803, the United States was gifted an opportunity that would change the course of human history, when France's dreams of a Western Caribbean and North American empire were destroyed after an uprising in their Caribbean islands known as Saint Dominique. Napoleon's world-renowned armies were defeated and incapable of subduing the united will of their former slaves, causing France to lose an estimated 55,000 men by 1802. This slave rebellion, led by Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines, gave birth to Haiti and forced France into a horrible position. The former colony Saint Dominique was France's most lucrative colony in the West and was considered a key asset in their Caribbean empire. After the defeat, Napoleon decided to cut his losses and prepared for an impending war with Britain. This series of events led to the Louisiana Purchase and gave America a massive amount of territory in the entire Mississippi River. Without the courageous revolutionaries of Haiti, the world as we know it today would be drastically different. Aside from its value as an interconnected transportation network, the Mississippi also provides invaluable natural resources like many other great river systems. In all of recorded history, the most prosperous ancient civilizations all shared a common geographical feature, which was that all these civilizations were built around a mighty and powerful river. Water is essential to all life on Earth. Rivers act as the artery system to the planet, bringing abundant life through the distribution of water and vital resources to a region. Rivers brought ancient civilizations drinking water, fertile land for crops, means of easy transportations of goods, fishing, and wildlife resources. Examples of this are ubiquitous all around the world. In the Nile River Delta, we have the ruins of one of the most advanced and greatest civilizations in recorded history in ancient Egypt. In the Mesopotamia region in the modern-day Middle East, the Tigris and the Euphrates River gave birth to ancient Sumer and many great civilizations. In modern-day Pakistan, the Indus River produced the Indus Valley civilizations which stretched across northwest India to northeast Afghanistan. Similarly, in ancient China, it was the Yellow or Honghe River which provided for the Chinese ancient human cultivation in that region. The prosperity of these regions was not based on their accessibility to water alone, as there are many regions in the world with availability to water. What made these river regions so successful is a physical behavior of these massive rivers, which alters the physical land mass and soil in these regions, making them the most fertile parts of the planet and ripe cradles for human civilization. A river delta is a landform created by deposited sediment which was carried by a river. Alluvium is material deposited by rivers, usually in the lowest part, forming floodplains and deltas. Alluvium consists of silt, sand, clay, and gravel, and often with a good amount of organic matter. It is this alluvium deposits which make some of the most fertile soil on Earth. In some regions, alluvium deposits contain gold, platinum, gemstones, and tinstone. Fertile alluvium deposits produced unrivaled fertility to the aforementioned ancient civilizations, and the same is true in those regions today, along with modern agriculture along the banks of the Amazon and near the Ganges and Brahmaputra in India. It is estimated that the Yellow River carries 796 million tons of sediment annually, and the river is named after the color that the transported matter gives the river. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad stated that the best parts of the planet are the holy city of Mecca in the rich Nile Valley. Ancient Egypt was called by its inhabitants Kemet, meaning land of the black, and it was named this after the black alluvium soil deposits that came after the annual flooding of the Nile. As one of the most powerful river systems in the world, the Great Mississippi River also performs this beneficent deposit of rich alluvium. The Mississippi River carries alluvium all the way from the Rockies in the west and the Appalachians in the east, making its floodplain delta one of the most fertile regions of the world. There are so many similarities between the Mississippi and the Nile that the early white settlers of southern Illinois named the region Little Egypt. In 1799, a Baptist missionary named John Badgley was on top of the Buff Cliffs overlooking the American Bottoms near Edwardsville, Illinois. The Baptist missionary, who was very familiar with the Bible, while overlooking the American Bottoms, he called the region the land of Goshen. The land of Goshen is the name of the promised land given to the Hebrews, or the children of Israel, in Egypt after God separated them from an oppressive Pharaoh. The land of Goshen was some of the richest territory in ancient Egypt, as it was located in the Nile Delta in Lower Egypt. The American Bottoms is a 175 square mile Mississippi floodplain east of St. Louis from Alton, Illinois to the Kaskaskia River. The plain was the central location of the pre-Columbian Cahokia Mounds, which the Baptist missionary could see from the cliffs. The Cahokia Mounds were pyramid-like structures and also happened to be the largest pre-Columbian settlement built by Native Americans north of Mexico. Also, similar mound structures were built near the Etowah River in Georgia. Comparably, how the Great Pyramids of Giza are located in the fertile Nile Delta, the Cahokia Mounds are located in a fertile Mississippi floodplain. The floodplain is also home to Brooklyn, Illinois, which is the oldest town incorporated by blacks in the United States who were fleeing oppression and slavery. The town is known as Freedom Village. The American Bottoms floodplain is located near the meeting of the two rivers, or the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi River. 136 miles to the south, at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi, the town was named Cairo, Illinois. Along a crescent-shaped part of Alabama and Mississippi, there exists an area known as the Black Belt Prairie for its fertile, dark-colored soil. This region is in contrast with the surrounding forested areas and can be seen from space. This black belt of fertile land is another similarity with Kemet. The Mississippi River region is naturally home to a host of habitats and wildlife. The Mississippi River has at least 260 species of fish, with 25% of all fish species in North America living in the Mississippi River. 60% of all North American birds use the Mississippi River basin as their migratory flyways, and many mammal, amphibian, and reptile species inhabit the Mississippi as well. The Mississippi alluvial plain around the core of the lower Mississippi River has many different geographical regions that go by many different names worthy of distinction. The Mississippi River Delta in Louisiana is the outlet where the river meets the ocean at the Gulf of Mexico and is host to a large diversity of wildlife. This delta, built by sediment deposits, range from interior forested wetlands with cypress trees, freshwater marshes to brackish marshes, sandy beaches, and barrier islands. The delta estuaries are rich and biodiverse. Above the lower part of Louisiana into the state of Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and southern Illinois, you have the Mississippi embayment or the Mississippi floodplain. The floodplain on the east side of the river in the state of Mississippi is further subclassified as the Mississippi Delta or the Wazoo Mississippi Delta. The Wazoo River is a smaller tributary river to the Mississippi and runs parallel to the Mississippi until eventually joining the Mississippi in Vicksburg, Mississippi. This section of the alluvial plain is about 200 miles long and about 7,000 square miles, and historically was developed as one of the richest cotton growing areas of the United States before the American Civil War. The rest of the floodplain to the north and west of the Mississippi goes by various names. The floodplain naturally was abundant with rich wetlands that would flood annually across the plain. However, much of the wetland areas have been drained and converted into agricultural land. The remaining wetlands in the delta provide migratory birds with important winter habitat. The natural banks of the river and the floodplains provided vital wildlife habitat, flood storage and prevention, water quality improvement, groundwater recharge, erosion protection, and natural beauty. However, hundreds of miles of levees, along with many dams and dikes, were built in an attempt to control the river. Over time, the levees have proven to be counterproductive because the levees actually confine the river to narrower channels, which cause the river to rise higher and flow faster, instead of allowing it to naturally spread across its wide floodplain. Now, when the river floods, it is much more powerful and catastrophic, and levees are continuously built, exacerbating the flood problem. Nitrogenous and phosphorus runoffs from industrial farming is also problematic throughout the length of the river, as fertilizers can cause algae blooms and have created a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. However, still to date, the river provides bountiful resources to the region, including drinking water for millions, fishing, a commercial shipping highway, and many recreational uses. The Midwest region of the United States is generally the central region in between the eastern and the western parts. The Midwest section overlaps many defining geographical regions, such as a considerable part of the Mississippi River Basin and large amounts of the Great Plains. The Midwest is considered the heartland of the country, and its central location makes it a transportation crossroads between the East and West. The production of the Midwest region gradually grew as canals and then railroads increasingly linked the Midwest with the early Eastern market. Over time, much of the industry and manufacturing was transferred from the Northeast to the Midwest. Historically, the economic region around the Great Lakes from Pennsylvania to Wisconsin was the manufacturing heartland of this country. In recent decades, this region has suffered devastating economic decline, but the Midwest today is still the manufacturing center of the United States. Being in the center of the country gives preferable conditions for manufacturing, as shipping distances to either edge of the country are minimized, reducing shipping costs and time. In 2010, the Midwest accounted for 30% of the total U.S. manufacturing. Along with manufacturing, the Midwest is the center of U.S. agriculture. Much of the soil in the Midwest region is extremely fertile due to the Great Plains, and thus the Midwest was developed to become the breadbasket of the country. 7 out of the top 10 agricultural producing states and cash receipts are located in the Midwest. Those states are Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, Kansas, Wisconsin, and Indiana. Along with being home to the majority of the most agricultural productive states, the Midwest also specializes in the leading farm commodities like corn, soybean, dairy, and wheat. The Midwest is home to the corn and soybean belts, along with much of the wheat and dairy belts. Corn is one of the most important grain crops globally, as it is used for human food, livestock feed, and biofuel and ethanol production. Corn is the number one agricultural crop of the United States, and the U.S. produces 36% of the global corn supply, and most of that production is centered in the Midwest. Soybeans are the second highest valued crop after corn, as world demand has dramatically increased for the derivative products of soybeans. The soybean belt is centered around the Midwest region as well. Wheat is the third largest field crop produced in the United States. Only behind China and India, the United States is ranked third in the world in wheat production. Most of the U.S. wheat production is winter wheat, which is planted in autumn and harvested in the summer. The Midwest states of Kansas and North Dakota lead in winter wheat production. Lastly, the dairy belt, which is another one of the leading U.S. agricultural commodities, is heavily produced in the Midwest and stretches around the Great Lakes region to the northeast. The Midwest region has large deposits of iron ore, which is used to make steel. The largest iron ore deposits in the country are found in Minnesota near Lake Superior. Zinc and lead are also in the Midwest, with many mines located in Missouri. Precious gold deposits are found in the Black Hills of South Dakota. As we continue to move westward, we enter the Great Plains. A prairie or steppe is a large, flat, open grassland. When the European colonizers first saw the Great Plains, as they moved further west, they referred to them as a sea of grasses. The grasslands extended for miles, and the tops of the grasses waved in the breeze like waves of the ocean. The Great Plains had conditions much different than the forest habitats east of the Mississippi River. West of the Mississippi, rainfall gradually lessens, and the forest biomes give way to vast, seemingly endless flat grasslands, with hills and trees few and far between. At one time in the past, prairie grasses stood taller than grown men, with some grasses in the eastern prairies in the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas sometimes reaching 8 to 12 feet tall. The height of the grasses in the Great Plains varied, gradually lowering from east to west, proportional to the lessening rainfall, with short grasses on the western edge near the Rocky Mountains. At one time, the Great Plains were so extensive that they were considered the characteristic landscape of the United States, more so than the forests in the east or the deserts in the south. The Great Plains, many years ago during the first European expeditions, were teeming with life and could have been considered the Serengeti of the West. The prairies were home to pronghorn, prairie dogs, jackrabbits, rattlesnakes, wolves, coyotes, elk, bears, along with the dominating presence of the North American bison. Before 1492 and the European invaders, the North American bison numbered between 30 to 40 million, dominating the Great Plains landscape. The history of the bison in North America is not a story of neglected wildlife, but is actually a story of tactical extermination. Many Native American tribes that lived in the Great Plains had an intimate relationship to the bison herds that roamed the Great Plains. Like nature, many tribes did not have a concept of a waste product and would utilize every part of the bison that they hunted. The tribes would hunt bison for their meat and use their hides for teepees and clothing. Furthermore, many tribes had strong spiritual and cultural ties to the bison. This made many tribes in the plains highly dependent upon the bison population, and the enemies of the natives took notice. The white settlers who were at war with the natives targeted their relationship with the bison. During America's expansion west, the settlers and explorers ventured out with the idea and the policy of manifest destiny, which was the notion that it was the inevitable fate, divinely ordained, God-given right to overtake the continent from sea to shining sea. When the Europeans came here, they wanted every inch of land that their eyes laid upon, and did whatever it took to achieve that end. Over centuries, the Europeans waged endless wars against the native people throughout the continent with complete eradication as the goal. Thomas Jefferson said, "If ever we are constrained to lift the hatchet against any tribe, we will never lay it down till that tribe is exterminated or driven beyond the Mississippi. In war, they will kill some of us. We shall destroy them all." The 26th President Theodore Roosevelt said, "I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are dead Indians, but I believe 9 out of 10 are, and I shouldn't like to inquire too closely into the case of the 10th. The 7th President Andrew Jackson, the founder of the Democratic Party, was known as the Indian Killer, and the Muskogee called him Sharp Knife. In 1830, a year after he became president, he signed the Indian Removal Act, which legalized the ethnic cleansing of the natives and forced tribes off their native lands to designated territories west of the Mississippi. Andrew Jackson stated, "Those tribes cannot exist surrounded by our settlements, and in continual contact with our citizens is certain. They have neither the intelligence, the industry, the moral habits, nor the desire of improvement which are essential to any favorable change in their condition. Established in the midst of another and a superior race, and without appreciating the causes of their inferiority, or seeking to control them, They must necessarily yield to the force of circumstances and ere long disappear. Many reservations were territories in the Great Plains that the white settlers deemed worthless. The Sioux and other tribes hunted bison on the open plains, but the Americans wanted the West to be free of the native problem and forced strong warrior tribes to be docile farmers. In an attempt to achieve their true desire of exterminating the natives, the U.S. military knew that killing the bison was essential and invented innovative methods of killing them as effectively as possible. White fur trappers and traders aided in the killing of the bison, but by the middle of the 19th century, killing for sport was commonplace, as passengers would shoot bison from trains. In the 1830s, the intentional mass murders of bison began, and in the 1870s, the killings escalated until thousands were killed per day, with 2 million bison being killed in 1 year in 1870 alone. The population of American bison went from 30 million to 325 in 1884. Today, the bison have made a slight recovery with an estimated 500,000 bison in the U.S., with Yellowstone National Park having the largest population of free-ranging wild bison. The climate of the Great Plains is brutal, with frigid temperatures far below freezing during the winters and hot temperatures with shadeless sunlight during the summer. Mollisol soils are another soil in the 12 soil orders. Mollisol soils are produced from grassland ecosystems and predominate the Midwest due to the Great Plains. Mollisols are characterized by a thick and dark surface horizon. The surface horizon is the result of long-term addition of organic material produced from plant roots and is very fertile. Mollisol soil is one of the most productive agricultural soils in the world, and the vast Great Plains are the reason the Midwest is so fertile. The grasslands deposited layer upon layer of organic sediment. The wildlife of the Great Plains also contributed greatly to the soil condition. Millions of bison contributed to the organic material buildup, and while they foraged and trampled the soil, they mixed up the top layers of the subsoil, aerating it and giving water a way to percolate downward. The prairie dogs, pocket gophers, and other burrowing animals shaped the landscape as well and kept the plains grassy for thousands of years. The early settlers stumbled upon the almost endless supply of fertile land and converted as much as they could to agriculture. However, the agricultural methods used by American farmers were destructive to the environment and unsustainable. The original plants and animals were removed, and tremendous soil erosion created the Dust Bowl of the 1920s and 1930s. The root system of the grasses kept the fertile soil together, but when the farming plows broke through, destroying the native vegetation, this caused severe soil erosion. In some parts of the plains, domestic cattle confined to specific areas overgrazed the grasses before they could rejuvenate. Over the years, there have been many mismanaged farm practices which have eroded the natural environment, and the massive farming operations that currently exist in the Great Plains are due to large-scale irrigation and damming projects. The Great Plains are host to much of the Mississippi River drainage basin, with the Missouri River being the longest and most prominent tributary. While the Mississippi River is world-renowned, there is also a hidden geographical treasure, which is key to the production of the Great Plains. The Okolala Aquifer is an enormous underground system which extends through parts of South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. The Okolala Aquifer is one of the largest aquifers in the world. 30% of all the groundwater used in irrigating crops in the United States comes from this aquifer. This aquifer also supplies drinking water to millions of Americans in the plains. But like many natural resources, the aquifer is at risk for over-extraction, and if depleted, it would take 6,000 years to replenish naturally through rainfall. The Great Plains also contain some of the Western Hemisphere's most abundant and accessible coal reserves. As we continue west of the Great Plains, the flat land dramatically rises as we reach the legendary Rocky Mountains. The Rockies are a major mountain range which stretches 1,900 miles from British Columbia, Canada to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and vary in width from 70 to 300 miles. The Rocky Mountains cut a continental divide between east and west. West of the continental divide, all the rivers flow into the Pacific Ocean, and east of the divide, the rivers drain into the Arctic, the Gulf, or the Atlantic Ocean. Triple Divide Peak in Montana is the hydrological apex of the North American continent, where water that falls at this summit can reach the Atlantic, Arctic, or Pacific. Mount Albert is the highest peak in the Rockies at 4,300 399 meters tall. The state of Colorado has the top 30 highest peaks, along with 78 of the 100 highest peaks of the Rockies, with Wyoming having 10, New Mexico having 6, and Montana having 3. Precipitation in the Rockies generally increases from south to north. Large variances in altitude and latitude of the Rocky Mountains causes a vast variety of ecosystems. Therefore, the Rockies are sometimes categorized by biotic zones, or the plant and the wildlife in that area. The Rockies are home to at least 10 forest zones, with different pines in the southern warmer and drier areas and Douglas firs in the northern colder areas. The Rockies are vastly uninhabited compared to other regions in the United States and present a small vision of wild America. The Rockies are habitats for elk, moose, deer, mountain goats, bighorn sheep, badgers, wolverines, black and grizzly bears, cougars, lynx, and wolves. Yellowstone National Park was the world's first national park, established in 1872. The gold rush was the first major industry in the Rocky Mountains, which brought thousands of explorers after gold was found in Colorado, Idaho, and Montana. The Idaho gold rush produced more gold than California and Alaska gold rushes combined. The Rocky Mountains contain significant amounts of copper, gold, lead, molybdenum, silver, tungsten, zinc, beryllium, and uranium. Sapphires are mined in Montana, and the Wyoming basin has reserves of coal, natural gas, shale oil, and petroleum. Molybdenum is used in heat-resistant steel in cars and planes. The mines in Colorado are some of the largest producers of molybdenum in the world. Mines in northern Idaho produce silver, lead, and zinc. The Rockies are also a good source of coal bed methane. The San Juan Basin in New Mexico and Colorado and the Powder River Basin in Wyoming contain trillions of cubic feet of estimated natural gas. Northwest of the Rockies, we reach the Pacific Northwest. As white settlers continued their push toward the sea, the first pioneers sent back words of their success in the rich and diverse Pacific Northwest. Thousands of Americans moved west through the famed wheeled wagon route called the Oregon Trail, which connected the Missouri River to the fertile valleys in Oregon. West of the Rockies, the Pacific Northwest region is bounded by Canada to the north and the Pacific Ocean on the west coast. Historically, the land west of the Rockies and north of California was Oregon country, which was disputed territory until a treaty in June 1846, settling the U.S. and Britain boundaries at the 49th parallel. The Pacific Northwest consists of the states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, with western Montana and northern California sometimes being included. The Pacific Northwest is filled with a variety of geography, including several prominent mountain ranges, desert plateaus, river valleys, and coastal rainforests. The Cascade Mountain Range extends from British Columbia, Canada to northern California and is key in shaping the geography and climate of the Pacific Northwest. The highest point in the Cascades is Mount Rainier near Seattle, Washington, which is the third highest peak in the United States. The Cascade Mountains are highly active geologically and were formed by the Cascadia subduction zone. Within the Cascade Mountains are a chain of active volcanoes known as the Cascade Volcanic Arc. The volcanoes extend north beyond the Cascades and Fraser River into Canada's coast mountains. Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland are some of the major cities located along the volcanic arc. Portland sits under the shadow of Mount Hood. The volcanic arc is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is a ring around the Pacific Ocean, where there is a continuous series of volcanic arcs, volcanic belts, oceanic trenches, and plate movements. 90% of the world's earthquakes occur around the Ring of Fire. On May 18th in 1980, Mount St. Helens in the state of Washington exploded in the most disastrous volcanic eruption in U.S. history. The entire north face of the mountain slid away, causing the largest landslide in United States history. The eruption column rose 15 miles into the atmosphere and deposited ash in 11 states. In an eruption equivalent to 26 megatons of TNT, 57 people were killed directly, thousands of animals died, and hundreds of square miles were reduced to wasteland. However, within the Cascades, there is also a large amount of untapped geothermal power that could be generated. Along the coastline of the U.S. bordering the Pacific Ocean, there are a series of mountain chains. The Olympia Mountains are located at the northwest tip of Washington near Canada. The Oregon Coast Mountains extend south of the Columbia River at Oregon's border with Washington along Oregon's coast until the Coquille River, where underneath that the Willamette Mountains extend into northern California. The Oregon coastal range is 200 miles long with a host of wildlife in the forest and aquatic life in the rivers and streams. The Columbia River is the largest river in the Pacific Northwest region, starting in the Canadian Rockies and flowing 1,214 miles through Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, across several mountain ranges, with a 258,000 square mile drainage basin before reaching its estuary at the Pacific Ocean. Its tributaries spread into parts of Montana, Nevada, Wyoming, and Utah, with its largest tributary being the Snake River. The Columbia River cuts a massive gorge through the Cascade Mountains, providing a critical navigable path through the Cascades and the only water connection between the Columbian Plateau and the Pacific Ocean. It once produced the largest salmon runs on Earth, but today many dams and reservoirs have caused a sharp decline in the natural course of the river and resulted in declining wildlife populations. Much of the Columbia River has been dammed, making the Pacific West a powerhouse for hydroelectric power. Hydropower has been critical in the Pacific Northwest and has had an integral role in the economy and the success of the region. The steep gradients of the Columbian River and its tributaries make it supreme for hydroelectric generation. The Columbia River flows through multiple mountain ranges in its journey to the sea. The potential energy from those elevations, along with the empowering surge from the snowmelt runoff, make the river an excellent source of hydroelectricity. The Rocky Canyons also provide a good footing for dams. The Columbia River Basin generates more than 40% of all U.S. hydroelectric generation and is responsible for 50% of the power in the region. The Grand Coulee Dam in Washington is the largest hydroelectric power plant in the United States. West of the Rockies and before the Columbia River flows through the Cascade Mountains, on the east side it cuts through the Columbian Plateau. The plateau is covered with basaltic lava flows with a semi-arid climate. The plateau is a major agricultural region, including the Yakima and the Walla Walla valleys. The Pacific Northwest climate is diverse and regional. Along the coast it is cool and wet, which has given rise to temperate rainforests, with some of the tallest and largest trees on Earth. The moderate temperatures along the coast combined with the heavy rainfall has produced the largest ecoregion of its kind on Earth. Big coniferous trees dominate this habitat. The heavy rainfall and mild temperature conditions in the Pacific Northwest, in southern Oregon and northern California has given birth to the tallest living things on Earth, with some redwood trees growing 360 feet tall. However, more inland across the Cascade Mountains, there is land that is so arid it is considered to be a desert. The Cascade Mountains produce the rain shadow effect in the Pacific Northwest, where the mountains block the rain-producing weather and cast a shadow of dryness behind them. East of the mountains, the temperatures vary much more significantly than west of the Cascades. On the east, the winters are colder and summers can be meaningfully hotter. West of the Cascades usually have warm, dry summers with wet, moderate winters. Most of the rainfall occurs between October to March. Parts of the Olympic Mountains can see 200 inches of precipitation per year on average, with the western slopes of the Olympic Mountains being the wettest place in the 48 contiguous states. Much of the Northwest water is stored naturally in winter snowpack in the mountains. When spring arrives and the snow melts, the water release compensates the environment during the drier summer. In recent years, climate change has threatened this delicate balance, causing water shortage during the summer and increased flood risk during the winter as less precipitation falls as snow. The climate of Seattle is usually considered a modified Mediterranean climate because it is similar to moderate Mediterranean climate but slightly cooler and wetter. As a result of its proximity to the Pacific Ocean and its position on the Puget Sound and Lake Washington, the temperatures of Seattle are quite tame. Despite Seattle's high latitude, extreme colds are rare during winter, and so are extreme heat during the summer. Seattle is the cloudiest region of the United States, being cloudy or partly cloudy almost 300 days out of the year. Seattle has a reputation for rain with its many rainy days, but despite its reputation, the rain is usually a light drizzle, and the amount of precipitation that falls in Seattle is actually less than New York City, Miami, or Houston. Portland is slightly warmer and drier than Seattle. The Puget Sound is the third largest estuary in the United States, behind the Chesapeake Bay and the San Francisco Bay. As the third largest estuary, the Puget Sound is home to many different species, including various salmonoid species like the sockeye salmon and steelhead trout, along with harbor seals and orcas. In the Pacific Northwest, The mountains, the oceans, and valleys in this region produce a diversity of climates that support the production of hundreds of different agricultural commodities. Substantial precipitation and moderate temperatures help Oregon and Washington growers produce specialty crops. Farming in the Pacific Northwest is much different than farming in the Midwest, which concentrates in the dominant corn, wheat, and soybean belts. Agriculture in the Northwest is characterized by a diversification of crops and an abundance of specialty crops. Agriculture is woven into the fabric of the Pacific Northwest heritage, culture, and economy. The Pacific Northwest farmers steward over 40 million acres. The Pacific Northwest is one of the powerhouses for production of agriculture and forest products that are exported globally. Oregon exports 40% of its agricultural production out of the country. Oregon, Washington, and Idaho together are the #1 producers of several key agricultural commodities. The agriculture industry generates hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in sales every year, and in different rural parts of the region, it is the primary economic engine. The state of Washington leads America in apple production, accounting for approximately 70% of all apples grown in the United States. Washington's apple production is valued at almost $2.4 billion per year. The state of Washington is #1 in producing hops, pears, blueberries, spearmint oil, wrinkled seed peas, and aquaculture. Its remaining top 10 commodities after apples are dairy products, cattle, potatoes, wheat, cherries, hay, chicken eggs, grapes, and the forbidden hogs. Wheat farms are one of the largest economic drivers of jobs in eastern Washington. The state of Oregon ranks first nationally in the production of many different commodities, including hazelnuts, Christmas trees, and blackberries. The top agricultural commodity for Oregon, valued at approximately $995 million, is greenhouse and nursery, as its fertile soil, moderate temperatures, and abundant rainfall provides impeccable growing conditions for a variety of trees and other plants. Agriculture, valued at approximately $7.4 billion, is 20% of Idaho's economy. Idaho is known for its seed industry, producing 80% of the sweet corn seed grown worldwide. Covered in sugar beet and potato fields, Idaho ranks #1 in potatoes in America, accounting for 30% of the potato production. One of the most important major tributaries to the Columbia River is the Willamette River, which flows in its valley northward in Oregon. Between the Oregon coastal mountains to the west, the Kalapoya Mountains to the north, and the Cascades to the east, the Willamette Valley is the 150-mile-long crown jewel of Oregon. The Willamette Valley contains Oregon's 6 largest cities, including Portland, its capital Salem, and 2/3 of Oregon's population. The Willamette Valley is incredibly fertile due to a combination of the volcanic basalt from ancient lava flows and alluvium deposits across its flat plain by glacial melting in the Willamette River. The Willamette Valley, along with the Yakima Valley in Washington, are synonymous with vineyards and wine production. It is stated that some of the best wine in the world is produced in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, along with the Yakima Valley and Walla Walla Valley and the Tri-Cities region in Washington. The legends of these rich, fertile valleys promoted some of the initial drive by the Europeans into the Pacific Northwest. Directly south of the Pacific Northwest, below the Snake River Plain, east of the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada Mountains in California, and west of the Rockies, exists the Great Basin. The Great Basin covers 95% of Nevada, the western parts of Utah, along with parts of Oregon, Idaho, and California. The Great Basin is approximately a 200,000 square mile basin that drains internally with no water outlet. All the precipitation or water coming into the Great Basin evaporates, sinks underground, or flows into lakes inside of the basin, which are mostly salt lakes. The climate is affected by the rain shadow of the Sierra Nevada and the Cascade Mountains, preventing Pacific Ocean storms from reaching the basin, which causes the arid desert conditions. Internally, the Great Basin is characterized by many smaller mountains and valley chains from north to south, along with many scattered lakes. The mountains range from 60 to 120 miles long and 3 to 15 miles wide, while the valleys are slightly wider. The higher elevation of the mountains allows them to catch some of the precipitation, which supports conifer stands. The Great Basin's brittlestone pine is considered the longest living organism on Earth, with trees being dated over 5,000 years old. The population concentration in the Great Basin is mostly on the east side near Salt Lake City and on the west side of the basin near the Sierra Nevadas on the Reno-Sparks metropolitan area. The Reno on the west side of the basin sits in the drainage basin of Lake Tahoe, and Pyramid Lake. On the east side of the basin, west of the Rockies, nearly 80% of Utah's population reside. Salt Lake City is the capital and most populous city in Utah, which sits next to the largest lake in the Great Basin and the largest salt lake in the Western Hemisphere. The Great Salt Lake has a higher salinity than even the ocean due to its high mineral content. However, it is still host to millions of native birds and wildlife. While the Great Basin may be low on vegetation, it is loaded with mineral resources. Much of America's gold, magnesite, barite, and mercury are produced in Nevada, which is also among the leading producers of lithium, silver, diatomite, and gemstone. Utah is the leading producer in beryllium ore and is among the leading producers in gold, silver, copper, iron ore, and molybdenum. South of the Great Basin, we get into the southwest region of the United States. Directly south of the Great Basin in eastern California is Death Valley, the northern part of the Mojave Desert. Death Valley is the lowest, hottest, and the driest location in North America. Death Valley is one of the hottest places on Earth with its record high of 134 degrees Fahrenheit. The name Death Valley was obtained by gold seekers who died in an attempt to cross the valley during the 1849 California gold rush. The Mojave Desert is 47,877 square miles, with its boundary generally confined by the native vegetation Joshua trees, which are indicator species. Las Vegas sits on the peripheries of the Mojave Desert. The Mojave Desert is a part of the much larger North American desert, which is composed of the Mojave, the Sonoran, and the Chihuahuan deserts. The Sonoran Desert in Arizona stretches into Mexico directly south and Mexico's Baja Peninsula to the southwest. The total area of the Sonoran Desert is approximately 120,000 square miles and is the second largest hot desert in North America. The largest city in the Sonoran Desert is Phoenix. The largest hot desert in North America is the Chihuahuan Desert, which stretches approximately 140,000 square miles through southern Arizona, New Mexico, western Texas, and down into Mexico. The rain shadow of the Sierra Madre Occidental creates the dry climate of the Chihuahuan Desert. The U.S. city of El Paso lies in the Chihuahuan Desert. While the Chihuahuan Desert receives more rainfall than the Sonoran and the Mojave, it is still very dry. However, despite the dry conditions, the desert is home to many amphibians, reptiles, and mammal species, including hundreds of birds, mule deer, pronghorn, jaguars, and 110 fish species. Urbanization, overgrazing, water depletion, and diversion with increased agriculture has made the Chihuahuan Desert one of the most endangered ecoregions in the world. Historically, it was one of the few ecoregions where grizzly bears, wolves, and jaguars could be found in the same location. The Colorado River is the major river in the southwest region of the country and cuts through the Colorado Plateau, producing some of the most iconic, picturesque scenery and renowned landscapes of America. The headwaters of the Colorado River begin in the Colorado Rockies, and the river flows approximately 1,450 miles through the states of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and historically emptied out into the Sea of Cortez or the Gulf of California. Its drainage basin is critical to life in the arid region and extends further, touching the states of California, New Mexico, Nevada, and Wyoming, with the total area of approximately 246,000 square miles. The Colorado River Delta, where the river meets the ocean, is in northern Mexico. Historically, this was a very rich, biodiverse estuary system. However, the upstream use and depletion of fresh water in the American Southwest has resulted in the loss of most of the wetlands in the area. So much of the Colorado River has been irrigated that currently the river typically does not meet the ocean. The Colorado River is extremely important and is the lifeline of the Southwest region. The Colorado River is used heavily for crop irrigation, hydroelectric power, and supplies drinking water to 30 million people in 7 different states. Many urban areas such as Phoenix, Tucson, and Las Vegas are totally dependent on the river as their primary water source. There have been many aqueducts built which divert water away from its natural river basin to provide water for cities like Denver and Los Angeles. Many dams have been built along the Colorado and its tributaries to generate electricity and control floods. Dams are able to store water during wet times and then distribute during drier years. The Hoover Dam, located at the border between Nevada and Arizona, is the largest dam in the region and was the tallest dam in the world at the time of its construction in the 1930s. The Hoover Dam, along with many other dams in the region, provide a generating capacity of approximately 4,175 megawatts. However, since the year 2000, the southwest region of the U.S. has been under a severe drought of historic proportions, which has significantly weakened the Colorado River. This has lessened its electricity generation capacity, along with its supply of available water to all the cities and the farms which are dependent on its irrigation. While much attention is put on the surface water, the groundwater aquifers are also paramount to the drainage basin. The groundwater and surface water are interconnected. The groundwater discharge to streams sustains surface water flows in the upper Colorado River basin. Groundwater accounts for between 30 to 50% of the water portfolio of the Colorado River basin in some areas. In New Mexico, groundwater accounts for 50% of the water supply. In Arizona, it accounts for 42%. The Colorado drainage basin is home to some of the fastest growing states in population, and the water supply is increasingly depleted due to demand and severe drought conditions. The Colorado Plateau is the high plateaus which cover an area of approximately 130,000 square miles near the four corners of Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. The Colorado Plateau is bounded by the Rockies, the Rio Grande Rift, the Mogollon Rim Escarpment, and the Great Basin to the west. The plateau is full of diverse, unique landforms including high mountains, river canyons, dry gullies, mesas, sunken deserts, and valleys. The region has numerous reservations and Native American reserves. For more than 1,000 miles, the Colorado River's erosive power has cut a winding deep gorge through the Colorado Plateau. This created the famous breathtaking canyon landscape of Arizona and Utah, including the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon in the southwest portion of the Colorado Plateau is 277 miles long and up to 18 miles wide. The Colorado Plateau holds major deposits of uranium, oil, natural gas, coal, and gillisonite. California is the second largest of the continental United States, with the highest GDP of approximately $3 trillion, which is comparable to the GDP of India. California is a very long state with a vast range of latitudes and numerous climate-shifting mountain ranges, which causes many microclimates throughout the state. Southern California is home to one of the most famous and influential cities in the world in Los Angeles, along with California's second most populous county, San Diego. Los Angeles sits in the LA Basin with the Pacific Ocean directly to the west and south, the Traverse Mountains bordering the northwest to the northeast, and the Peninsula Ranges to the southeast. The Traverse Mountain Ranges in Southern California are the only mountain ranges in the state that are oriented west to east instead of north to south, and they range from Santa Barbara County northwest of LA to east of San Bernardino County into the Mojave Desert. The Santa Monica Mountains are a 40-mile long part of the Traverse Range, which directly borders Los Angeles to the northwest. The Santa Monica Mountains range from Oxnard to east of Beverly Hills in the Griffin Observatory. The Santa Monica Mountains are home to some of the most famous communities in the Los Angeles area, including Calabasas, Malibu, Santa Monica, the Hollywood Hills, Bel Air, and Beverly Hills. The Peninsula Ranges are south of the Traverse Ranges and stretch 930 miles all the way to the southern tip of Baja California in Mexico. The Santa Ana Mountains are a short 61-mile part of the Peninsula Range, which are southeast of LA and north of San Diego. San Diego is about 120 miles south of LA and sits on the Pacific coast, or the bottom edge of California, just about 20 miles north of Mexico. To the east of San Diego is the Laguna Mountains, which are a 35-mile stretch of the Peninsula Range before the Mexican border. On the east of the mountains is the Sonoran Desert. Because of the mountains and the proximity to the ocean, Southern California has many microclimates which vary significantly over short geographic distances. The pleasant climates of Los Angeles and San Diego are renowned in the United States. San Diego's climate is classified as a semi-arid, near Mediterranean type. San Diego's climate is characterized by mild to warm, dry summers and mild winters with low annual rainfall of around 3 to 13 inches per year. Near the coast, summers can be foggy, but the climate shifts drastically just a few miles inland. Fault lines occur when tectonic plates push or slide past each other, displacing the crust of the earth. Pressure builds up until stress exceeds friction, creating a sudden release of energy that sends seismic waves through the ground called earthquakes. The infamous San Andreas Fault is a sliding boundary between the Pacific tectonic plate and the North American plate that splits California in two. The San Andreas Fault Zone is an 800-mile boundary where the plates grind past each other horizontally at a rate of about 2 inches per year. The San Andreas is not a single line but a system of faults in a zone. The last major quake along the fault was in 1906 when a 7.9 magnitude earthquake leveled parts of San Francisco and killed 3,000 people in the deadliest earthquake in U.S. history. With over 100 years since a big earthquake along the fault, scientists are now expecting a major earthquake along the San Andreas Fault by 2030. The Sierra Nevada mountain range is a significant natural border between the fertile California and the arid desert of the Great Basin. The Sierra Nevada mountains have produced stunning landscapes in natural parks like Yosemite National Park and Lake Tahoe and the Tahoe National Forest, which bring in hundreds of millions of dollars in annual tourism revenue. One of the defining features of California and one of the most important pieces of geography in the United States, and therefore a significant region of the world, is California's Central Valley. California's Central Valley is one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world, and it is what makes California the top producer in agriculture in the United States. The Great Central Valley is a large, flat valley approximately 40 to 60 miles wide and 450 miles long from northwest to southeast in the center of California. Covering an area of approximately 18,000 square miles, the Central Valley is one of the most notable structural depressions in the world. The California Central Valley is encased by mountains with the Traverse Range to the south, the California Coastal Range to the west along the Pacific, the Sierra Nevada Range to the east separating the valley from the Great Basin, and to the north by the Cascade and Willamette Mountains which extend into Oregon and the Pacific Northwest region. The Central Valley can be separated into two parts, the lower 3/5 being the San Joaquin Valley and the remaining smaller Sacramento Valley to the north. The watershed of the Central Valley consists of three parts because the San Joaquin Valley can be further divided into two, with the southern tip known as the Tulare Basin. In the lower Tulare Basin, in the past, the San Joaquin tributary rivers used to flow into the Tulare Lake before joining the primary San Joaquin River. In the basin now, it sits on the dried lake bed of the Tulare Lake because the Tulare Lake was dried up after water was diverted for agriculture in the 19th century. Covering over 700 square miles in the 1840s, the Tulare Lake was the largest freshwater body west of the Great Lakes. Above Fresno is the upper portion of the San Joaquin Valley, where the river systems flow directly into the San Joaquin River and empty out into the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. The Sacramento Valley in the north is drained by the Sacramento River and its tributaries. The Sacramento River carries much more water than the San Joaquin River. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta is formed at the convergence of the two rivers and is the sole outlet point of the mountain-encased Central Valley. The Delta is a biodiverse estuary which joins the San Francisco Bay after passing the Carquinez Strait. The San Francisco Bay is the second largest estuary in the United States. The southern San Joaquin Valley is much hotter and drier than the northern Sacramento Valley. The Sacramento Valley is slightly more humid with higher precipitation. Precipitation ranges from more than 20 inches a year in the north to approximately 5 inches in the far south. Due to the fertility of the soil, the growing conditions, and size of the Great Central Valley, California has absolute dominance in the agricultural production of the United States. The Central Valley uses up about 17% of the nation's irrigated land, and using fewer than 1% of the U.S. farmland, the Central Valley supplies 8% of the U.S. agricultural output by value. The Central Valley produces more than 250 different types of crops. According to the California Department of Food and Agriculture, in 2018, California's farms and ranches received nearly $50 billion in cash receipts, accounting for 13.5% of all United States agricultural commodities. While the American breadbasket grows the wheat and the corn, California grows the nation's fruits and vegetables. Over 1/3 of all the country's vegetables come from California, and 2/3 of the country's fruits and nuts are grown in California. California leads all states in growing 66 different food crops. In 2018, California produced $6.25 billion in grapes and $5.47 billion in almonds. California produced approximately 80% of America's strawberries, 51% of citrus fruit, 71% of head lettuce, 90% of broccoli, 99% of walnuts, 97% of kiwis, 97% of plums, 93% of celery, 90% of garlic, 90% of cauliflower, 58% of spinach, and over 75% of the carrots. The California Central Valley is so productive in agriculture because the warm and temperate climate of the region produces long growing seasons, and the soil is dominated by alluvium deposits due to the valley's ancient development. The Sacramento and Joaquin rivers, with their headwaters in the eastern mountains, also contribute to the alluvium deposits in the valley. The Sierra Nevadas and the eastern mountains in California play a significant role in creating the most productive land in the U.S. on one side, but on the other side, with their rain shadow, they produce the driest, most desolate landscapes in the Mojave Desert in the Great Basin. Texas is the largest of the contiguous United States at approximately 268,597 square miles, located in the south central U.S. Texas encompasses many of the landscapes and geographic regions mentioned previously. The eastern side of Texas is on the Gulf coastal plains, but as you move west, it gets drier, giving way to the bottom extent of the Great Plains. The southwest corner of Texas is a part of the Chihuahuan in the North American desert. Natural river systems form most of Texas borders, with the Red River forming most of the border with Oklahoma to the north. The Sabine River forms most of the boundary to the east with Louisiana and Arkansas. The Gulf of Mexico forms the eastern shoreline, and the Rio Grande separates Texas from Mexico in the southwest. The Rio Grande, at 1,901 miles, is the largest river in the south central U.S., and half of its watershed is shared by the United States and the other half is shared with Mexico. The Rio Grande has its headwaters in the Colorado Rockies and drains into the Gulf of Mexico. The river has international regulations because it flows through the arid North American desert in many areas, making it a lifeline for the region. Therefore, irrigation and water quality must be managed bilaterally between the two nations of America and Mexico. Now that we have categorized the geography of most of the continental United States, we have to analyze the natural resources and the mineral deposits of the U.S., because along with having fertile land and an outlet to the sea, our territory must also be minerally rich. Natural resources are key in an autonomous, industrialized nation. Some of the most important natural resources are fresh water, fertile soil, timber, and the various earth minerals for the production of technology and physical infrastructure. Hydrocarbons such as oil, coal, and natural gas are fundamental for energy production in the contemporary times. However, renewable energy capacity, which is dictated by geography, is also of significant and increasingly vital importance. Thus far, there have been 118 elements identified on the periodic table, with 98 occurring naturally. Each element has different properties and potential uses for technology and human activity in general. Iron is vital to the production of steel. Phosphorus from phosphate rock is used as a critical fertilizer in modern agriculture. Metals like zinc, lithium, cobalt, gold, silver, platinum, and copper are important for various industrial applications. According to the USGS, the total estimated value in non-fuel minerals in the U.S. economy in 2019 was $2.1 trillion. In 2019, the top non-fuel mineral commodity of the U.S. was crushed stone, accounting for 22% of the total value of mineral production. Crushed stone is utilized for road construction and maintenance, along with cement manufacturing and lime production. The other top U.S. non-fuel minerals are cement, construction sand and gravel, gold used for jewelry and electronics, and copper, which is used in a variety of applications. This map shows the value in dollars produced by each state in non-fuel minerals. According to the data from 2016, the top 5 mineral producing states in increasing order are Minnesota at number 5, California, Texas, Arizona, and Nevada leading the way at number 1. Much of Nevada's mineral industry comes from its production of precious metals. Nevada leads America in gold mining and is also a large producer of silver and copper. In order to power our prospective nation, we need energy. The top natural gas producing states are Texas, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Ohio, Colorado, West Virginia, Wyoming, New Mexico, and North Dakota. The top crude oil producing states are Texas, North Dakota, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado, Alaska, California, Wyoming, Louisiana, and Utah. The top coal producing states are Wyoming, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Montana, Indiana, North Dakota, Texas, and Alabama. In regards to renewable energy resources, this map showing the wind speed data indicates the potential wind energy capacity in the United States. The flat Great Plains in the center of the country have the most wind capacity. The top 10 states currently in producing electricity from wind are Texas, Iowa, Oklahoma, California, Kansas, Illinois, Minnesota, Colorado, Oregon, and North Dakota. This map shows the hydropower resources in the United States. Most of the hydropower comes from the Pacific Northwest on the Columbian River. Therefore, the Pacific Northwest also leads on this map, which shows the upgrade potential of existing hydropower infrastructure. However, this map showing the potential unutilized hydropower puts an emphasis on the Mississippi River Basin. The top 10 states in hydropower are Washington, California, Oregon, New York, Alabama, Arizona, Montana, Idaho, Tennessee, and Georgia. This map showing the geothermal resources of the United States indicates that most of the geothermal energy, unsurprisingly, is along the Cascade Volcanic Arc in the Ring of Fire. In regards to solar energy, this map showing the solar irradiance levels of the United States indicates that most of the U.S. has decent solar radiation levels, with the southwest region having exceptionally high irradiance and the most potential solar energy. Lastly, this map showing the hydrogen potential from combined renewable resources puts a strong emphasis on the Great Plains. The last major fact that must be addressed is the existing Native American reservations. We must remember that the entire Western Hemisphere, from Alaska to Quebec, Canada, to Patagonia, Argentina, was inhabited by different native nations and tribes before European diseases, greed, and genocide decimated their population. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us to think for the whole. In the 1930s, when he taught us the population of the original nation in North America, he gave us the number of black people and accompanied that number with the number of Native Americans. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us about our common origin and ancestry. During slavery, many native tribes took various blacks in and protected them. While many blacks in America cannot trace their ancestry back very far because we come from broken families due to slavery, many, if not most, blacks in America have the blood of the Native Americans flowing through our veins, and our destinies are tied together. Some of the largest Native American reservations in the country are Navajo Nation in the Colorado Plateau, reservations in Utah, the Tejano Nation reservation in Arizona, and several different reservations in South Dakota. Native American reserves are estimated to include nearly 30% of America's coal reserves west of the Mississippi, nearly 50% of the potential uranium reserves, 20% of the known natural gas and oil reserves, and the lands may contain rare earth minerals increasingly sought after for use in manufacturing. So now, after carefully surveying the land of the United States, we can make an assessment of the land that we want to choose to set up our civilization on the basis of freedom, justice, and equality, since we never received it under the American flag. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that we need between 8 to 10 states. Since every state in the United States of America is not the same size, we will have to take an average. The total square mileage of the U.S. is 3,797,000 square miles, including Alaska and Hawaii. Excluding Alaska and Hawaii, the square mileage of the continental 48 states is 3,119,884 square miles. Even though Alaska and Hawaii were not included in this geographic analysis, they are official states of America, and they are a territory that was annexed from Native Americans. So we will include those square miles in our calculations. If we divide the entire 3,790,000 square miles of the U.S., including Alaska and Hawaii, by 50 states, we get an average of 75,940 square miles per state, meaning that if we were to have 8 of those states, our new territory would be 607,520 square miles. If we took 10 of those states, our new territory would be 759,400 square miles. So now, based on the geographical analysis presented, the resources available, and the prospective political ambitions of our future nation, the best territories for us to settle on is the rich soil of the Mississippi floodplain. Some of the best civilizations we ever produced were along the rich Nile River in Nubia and Kemet. Now, we black people in America, who are the real children of Israel, should set up our new civilization along the rich Mississippi Delta and floodplains. With investment and cultivation under righteous leadership, our unity can make the Mississippi the new Nile and fulfill the prophecy of the oppressed children of Israel in Egypt being placed in the fertile land of Goshen. Like the Baptist missionary John Bagley noted in 1799, the Mississippi Valley inherently has the potential to be the land of Goshen. If America is willing to invoke the restorative justice deserved as outlined by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and black people united and moved to the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, that totals to just 496,756 square miles, giving us a remaining 110,764 square miles left on the low end and 262,644 square miles left on the high end, which can be used in various ways, forming land corridors to specific areas of interest. There are many different potential projections of how the land can be justly divided, but geopolitically, the core states along the Mississippi, which border the Gulf of Mexico, and the Great Lakes are critical. Having Illinois gives us access to the resources of the Great Lakes, along with an outlet to the upper Atlantic Ocean through the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Generally, this is an important shipping route to the center of America, but as the climate of the Earth gets warmer, the nearby Arctic Ocean has increasing significance, as it is host to many resources and potential shipping routes. However, the Gulf of Mexico, I believe, is the most important sea route for our future nation, and access to it should be non-negotiable. The Gulf of Mexico gives us direct access to Mexico, Central and South America, and particularly the Caribbean islands. The Caribbean islands are home to our brothers and sisters of the African diaspora. Building our nation along parts of the Gulf would give us direct access to our people in the islands, and ultimately direct access to the African continent. With us building a corridor to Africa, we can reverse the damage done to the continent and the people of the diaspora through trade and collective development and cultivation. This proposed territory is just, as we do not exceed the square mileage of the 10 states we identify, and we will not try to take every good part of the United States. In this proposed territory, one, we did not try to take the great California Central Valley on the west coast, or try to take the developed, wealthy East Coast megalopolis. However, another potential territory we could inhabit, which would fulfill the requirements of being fertile, minerally rich with an access to the sea, is if we were to inhabit the west coast landmass west of the Rockies. Proposed territory number 2 will be made up of California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, Idaho, Utah, and Hawaii. This still would give us an extra 22,068 square miles remaining. This land would give us the fertile California Central Valley, the entire Pacific coastline, and the rich mineral deposits of Nevada. However, this territory cuts us off from direct access to the Caribbean and Africa. I believe territory number 1, with the proper utilization of the full square mileage available, is the best option to meet our future geopolitical ambitions. We must keep in mind that we are not separating to build a desolate, poor, third world country which is dependent on foreign aid forever. Once we separate and we have the ability to teach ourselves the true knowledge of our history, and we are free to use our collective scientific and mathematical brain power, our future society will look much more like the fictional Wakanda than the current hoods that some of us live in today in American cities. As the fathers and mothers of mathematics and civilization, the original people have built great nations all over the world in every dispensation of time. We will build a civilization that is balanced in its protection and proliferation of natural habitat diversity and animal life, while simultaneously extracting the natural resources available for the growth and the sustainability of human advancement. This requires the built environment, comprising of the cities and their architecture, the energy systems and their engineering, the transportation networks and their material selection, to not just work cohesively alongside the natural environment, but the human built environment must also be restorative to the natural environment. Systems like this are not new, but are ancient, and we must unite to regain our natural position as the stewards of the earth. Keep in mind that in this presentation, we are not invoking a retaliatory justice where we enslave white people for 400 years and dehumanize them. We are simply demanding that reparatory justice be given to us by fulfilling the requirements that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad delineated in a land of our own. For those of you who would like to help end racism, oppression, and the discriminatory suffering that black and brown people in America face, you can donate right now to Muhammad's economic blueprint. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad proposed a painless economic plan which can immediately end poverty and want among us. The genius of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad's blueprint is that it relied on strength in numbers and us financing our own salvation. America has a population of around 330 million people, with black people comprising around 13.5%. That makes our population around 44 million people. If we exclude the 22.4% of our population that is under 18, that leaves us with 34,570,000. If we then remove an estimated 13% for unemployment, that gives us 30,076,596 people. With this many people, if everyone donated just 5 cents per day, in 1 year we could generate $548,897,877. However, since we know that we can never get 100% participation, we can generate exactly the same amount of money if just 5% of the population donates $1 per day. With our collective power economically, through real estate investment, we can begin to purchase land and build heaven on earth right now. We must remember that with God, our victory is inevitable. Thank you very much for watching. You can donate to freedom, justice, and equality now at economicblueprint.org. And you can also sign up for automatic payments at whatever dollar amount that you can spare. Thank you for watching.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad asked us to commit to save 5 cents a day. Since you call the $100 bill Benjamins, that ain't your Benjamin. That's their Benjamin. But if they like their face so much, yes, let's collect as many of their faces as we can. Mr. Charlie, look, see your face on the dollars. Mr. Charlie, what we want is all the land that's in the Delta. We want to start in Arkansas, same way they started, buying the land, working the hell out of us, picking the cotton to make America rich and strong. Let's go back over that road.